everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. So today is Tzom Gedalia, the fast of Gedalia. Gedalia ben Achikam was murdered either on this day, some say Rosh Hashanah, either or, and it was the first political assassination of the house of Judah. Not a good thing. We could have come back from the destruction of the temple, but due to jealousy, that's what happened, and that is why we fast on this day. We're also in the 10 days of, Asel Yemei Teshuvah? I don't know if it's called 10 days of awe, but 10 days of repentance. This is specifically for Jews. Everyone is judged on Rosh Hashanah, but Jews get the extra 10 days over there going up until Yom Kippur. Starting from Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is the 10th day, to try and correct everything that we have wronged. The reason we get this extra time is because we got the 613 to go by, whereas the rest of the world has to go by the 7. And so, yeah, a lot needs to be corrected. In any case, okay, so we're almost done with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. This is the before the final class, and let's get into it. So this one is called 7 Days. Hallelujah Adonai kol goyim shabechu kol haomim ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai leolam. Hallelujah. Rabbi Levitas, a man of Yavne, says, if a leper does not get spat on their face, they do not heal. And if a leper does not get spat on by his father in his face, he does not heal. As said in Numbers 12:14. God replied to Moses, if her father were to spit in her face, would she not be humiliated for 7 days? She should be confined for 7 days outside the camp, and afterwards she may be readmitted to the camp. So this is a very peculiar text coming from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, as well as the verse in the Torah. What does this mean? Your father's got to spit in the face for, be separated for 7 days. So the Radal refers to Avot de Rabbi Natan for a deeper understanding. This is Avot Rabbi Natan 9:2. Now, first we have the background. Rabbi Shimon would say, affliction come upon those who speak slander. For so we find with Aaron and Miriam, who spoke slanderously about Moses, and punishments came upon them. As it says in Numbers 12:1, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. And why does the verse place Miriam before Aaron? This teaches us that Tzipporah, the wife of Moses, went and talked to Miriam. And then Miriam went and told everything to Aaron, and then the two of them began to speak against this righteous man, Moses. And because these two spoke against a righteous man, punishment came upon them, as says in Numbers 12:9, and the Eternal became angry with them and departed. What do we learn from and departed? This teaches us that God departed from Aaron and attached to Miriam, because Aaron was not as engaged as Miriam in spreading slanderous word around, so she was immediately punished more. Miriam said prophecy has come to even those who had not separated from their spouses, right? Miriam did not separate from her husband, yet she was a prophet. Same thing with the 70 prophets. We've been through this. This is just another look. And Aaron said, prophecy has come to me, even though I have not separated from my wife. And even our earliest ancestors received prophecy, even though they did not separate from their wives. See the patriarchs and the matriarchs. But Moses, because he is so arrogant, again, this is just a matter of, okay, this was not exactly said, but this was the understanding. But Moses, because he is so arrogant, chas v'shalom, we know that this is not true, separated from his wife. So this is what Miriam said, or at least alluded to. And when it comes to Lashon Hara, it makes no difference if you say something outright, alluded to something, or even make a face. Hey, what do you know about this person? If you have something personal against them, even that face, that's considered Lashon Hara. You have to be very, very careful, right? So they did not make this, they did not take this up with Moses directly, nor did they know for certain that it was true. Like, why is he separating from his wife, right? It was not all clear. It was not at all clear that he was being arrogant. Clearly, this was not the case, right? Which is why one of God's 10 descents came to set the record straight regarding Moses. This is what we learned in last class. He is the Lord of all the prophets, Adon Kol Hanevim. This is Moses, past, present, and future. He is the only one to speak face to face, mouth to mouth, in absolute clarity and not in riddles like other prophets, as God said to them. He is the most humble man to have ever lived, as God said to them. He is the most loyal in all of God's house, as God said to them. If for no other reason than this to be officiated by God, written eternally in the Torah, Dayenu, it would be enough. You see, in other words, just for them to say all these things and even think these things, boom, 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 God set the record straight who this man is, and whatever you even potentially might be thinking, you are wrong. Let's continue. We can reason from this that if Miriam, who spoke against her brother only secretly, was still punished, then if one speaks against his friend publicly and shames him, all the more so will he be punished. So this was the background for what went down over there, and now we get to the next part. At that time, Aaron said to Moses, Moses, my brother, you think that this skin disease affects only Miriam, meaning the leprosy, but it is also upon the flesh of our father Amram, who, by the way, he was still alive at that time. Apparently, they even went into the land of Israel. This was the understanding. I will give you a parable to tell you what this is like, said Aaron to Moses. Like someone who has a hot coal placed in his hand, even if he tosses it around from place to place, his flesh is still burnt from one hand to the next. This is why it says in Numbers 12:12, let her not remain like a dead person, for since she also came out of our mother's womb, if it is half of our flesh that is consumed. Meanwhile, Aaron attempted to pacify Moses by saying, Moses, my brother, have we ever done harm to anyone in this world? He replied, no. Aaron continued, so if we have done no harm to anyone in the world, would we have wished to harm you, who are our brother? Now what can I do? Will this mistake come between the covenant between us? Come between the covenant that is between us? For he had established a covenant with Aaron and his sons, right? Moses did. As it says in Amos 1:9, they did not remember the covenant of brotherhood. At that moment, Moses, brotherhood meaning from the brothers and then from the line of Aaron. At that moment, Moses drew a small circle in the ground and stood in it and asked for mercy for Miriam. He said, I will not leave this spot until my sister Miriam is healed. As it says in Numbers 12:13, please God, heal her. El narefan ala. Then the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, if a king had reprimanded her, or if her father had reprimanded her, it would have been appropriate for her to sit in shame for 7 days. And since it is I, the King of all King of Kings, Melech Malchei HaMelachim, all the more so that it is for her to sit in shame for 14 days, right? Meaning the offense was greater because she insulted God's number one, meaning this is Moses. However, for your sake, Moses, says God to Moses, I will forgive her, as said in Numbers 12:14. The Eternal said to Moses, if her father spat in her face, would she not sit in shame for 7 days? So like we said last week, and every time this subject matter came up, Moses could not care less about his ego or pride or who said what about him, right? The most humble man to have ever lived, said God. Right after this was said to him, to his face, he did not care. Zero ego. The cloud descended and then separated Moses, keeping him in the tent. He said, go out. All three of them went out, but it separated Moses. Moses stayed in the tent, and Aaron and Miriam were outside, right? Keeping him in the tent, Aaron and Miriam essentially removing them from the tent. When the cloud ascended, Miriam was a leper and Moses was still inside the tent. Aaron immediately saw what was going on, and then he went to speak to Moses to let him know what was going on. So this just happened. Moses did not need a confession or appeasement. not from anyone, let alone from his beloved siblings, right? So what does spitting in one's face have to do with this case? This could be an earlier version of the term egg on one's face, right? Meaning being put to shame or ridiculed. According to the commentary from Rabbi Natan, it says that we have learned that when one receives insults without protest, his merit is great, and God personally steps in for that person. So now, take this, right? We have been insulted to our face. I'm sure everyone out there has at one point or another, whether it was by family, things get heated up. We tend to be looser with our tongues around our siblings and whatnot. I hate you, but you really don't. You love them. But in any case, or anybody else, it doesn't matter what is going on. If you hold that, like, yes, you just insulted me. Okay. But you hold that, God's going to take care of everything. But and again, who do you think sent that person to do that? This is a very, very clear test. Who do you think you're talking to? Do you know who I am? Who do you think you're talking to? Do you know who God is? God just made this happen and now you got upset and now you're angry with this person for God. Again, that person's going to get theirs. But you have an opportunity over here. So again, God will personally step in for you. He will handle everything. But you truly need to take the route of Moses over here, be like, it's all good, baby. No problem. Please heal her, right? Such was the case with Moses and Miriam. We have also learned that a person must be merciful to him who insulted him when he comes to ask for forgiveness. We are right now in these 10 days, right? Before we come to Yom Kippur, because right now, Rosh Hashanah is particularly it's the day of judgment. Now Yom Kippur so these 10 days right now is also we have to go Ben Adam Lechavero, the day of judgment, and then in the end Yom Kippur is Ben Adam Lamakom, between man and God. You can't come before God if you are not straight with your fellow man. And that's why from before Rosh Hashanah up until before Yom Kippur, we say to everyone, to our people, I'm sorry if I offended you, if I did anything to offend you. It was not on purpose, and if it was on purpose, please forgive me even more so. But if for some reason I did anything, ben b'mezid, ben b'shogeg, on purpose or by accident, to offend you or to insult you, to hurt you, to disrespect you in any way, shape, or form, even if I said something behind your back by accident, even if I thought a negative thought about you, please forgive me. Please forgive me. If you ask this person must forgive you. Now, it's not like you're not going to forgive me. You can't do it like that. You have to come properly and you have to come. And it says even you have to try and appease that person. If you really went out of your way on purpose to hurt that person and it's hard for them to forgive you, you have to appease them. And that means you break down and you beg them for forgiveness. For two reasons. One, if that person does not forgive you because of what you did, at some point you say, okay, well, listen, I tried. If you really did try, that person would forgive you. Again, if it was for real. Now that person is going into Yom Kippur, how can they come before God, say, hey, forgive me? And God's like, well, what about that person? You see? That's why Israel are Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Lazeh. That's why Yom Kippur is only for Israel, because we are obligated to do this as a family. So, like we said, you must be merciful on him who insulted you when he comes to ask for forgiveness, especially when they come sincerely and lay everything out before you. That's really how it is done. Say, okay, listen, I didn't mean to offend you, or I'm sorry you got offended. No, you don't do that. It's very difficult for us to do this because that means we have to look at ourselves. But there's something that, my wife always taught me, right? Makes me a better person. In any case, step into that person's shoes for a moment, okay? I get from where you're at, all you can do is see your perspective, but stop for a moment. This is how it's done. You step into that person's perspective. Forget about whether it makes sense to you logically or not. That is irrelevant right now. We're talking about Ishul Kav, straining a line, and we're talking about forgiveness. Step into that person's shoes, okay? As much as you possibly can, because it's not possible. Try and understand the psychology, where that person comes from, and why what you said, which might not necessarily be offensive to you, is offensive to them. And the moment that happens, the moment that thing clicks, your energy will immediately change. Your pitch volume will change. You will become almost embarrassed, ashamed of, wow. And then once it impacts you like that, that's when you do the true tikkun, because you'll never do it again, because now you felt your own wrath, so to speak. This is the true tikkun. That is tshuva and tikkun, a rectification. So try that. And again, if you know a person is not going to forgive you because that's who that person is, you can either say it in your mind or you say it to them. But again, if they're going to start, throwing things at you, then don't do that. But you have to be very, very real. This is no joke. Okay? All right. So like we said, such was the case with Moses and Aaron. With Moses and Aaron. So this is where you have to be merciful. Okay. As said in Masechet Megillah 28a, that a man must always forgive any offense done to him that day by anyone before he lays his head to rest. And this is exactly what we do before we go to sleep. That is, in fact, how we begin the bedtime Shema, by making a declaration. Now, this is a prayer from the Ari. We say it every night. Listen, because it's beautiful and it is very necessary. So we do tshuva every single day. Listen. Master of the universe, behold, you're making a declaration. I forgive and pardon anyone who has angered me, or who has antagonized me, or who has sinned against me, whether in relation to my body, or my money, or my honor, or anything that pertains to me, whether done compulsively or willingly, whether accidentally or deliberately, whether through words or through actions, whether in this present incarnation or in another incarnation, any human being, and may no person be punished because of me. Wow. Before you lay your head, right? May it be your will, my God and God of my ancestors, that I not sin again, and that I not be remembered by these sins. May I never again return to behavior that angers you, nor do what you perceive to be wrong. Not what I perceive to be wrong, what you perceive to be wrong, because we go by what God says, not by our understanding. And anyways I have sinned before you. With your abundant mercies, please erase, though not by means of suffering or terrible illnesses. It's important to say this, like, okay, I'll take that off, and here's, that'll take it off. But please, not through this, if possible, if that is possible. May the expression of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, God, my rock and my redeemer. Mwah. This is how we start the entire bedtime Shema, just like that. So, because we're going to ask for things afterwards. We're going to say Shema. We want to come clean before we even begin to ask for anything. Tell me you don't love this, right? We say this every single night. Because how can we come before our Father in heaven and ask for forgiveness if we do not forgive others? That's the entire thing of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is ben Adam lamakom, between man and God. So, Aaron did everything right, and Moses did everything right, and even Miriam received everything in the right manner. Now, how do we settle this? Let's continue. If a leper does not get spat on their face, right? We're going back to our opening text. They do not heal, and if a leper does not get spat on his face by his father, he does not heal, as said in Numbers 12:14. God replied to Moses, if her father were to spit in her face, would she not be humiliated for 7 days? She should be confined for 7 days outside the camp, and afterwards she may be readmitted to the camp. Why was their father Amram mentioned by Aaron in the Midrash, and one's father in general by God in this verse? Because the offense is not only upon that individual who offends, but upon their father's house as well. It's so important to understand, right? Just walking today in the street, you see how it's just ridiculous how 15-year-old girls dress. I'm like, their fathers must be so proud. It's crazy. How much lower we know. Okay. An offense to one's father would merit 7 days. As well, an offense towards a king would merit 7 days. This, of course, is the best case scenario, because if it gets to the point of her father spitting in her face, this could be the equivalent of destruction. You do not want to have your father toss you away. And who is the father of Israel if not God himself? As he said to Moses, I am the king of kings. So now God is father and king. How much more so that I should have the shame with me, said God to Moses. If we properly read the verse in Hebrew, the question to this decree is right there. Now listen. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe. God said to Moses, Ve'avia yarak befanea halo tikalem. Now you could continue and reading it say halo tikalem shiv'at yamim. So again, we're going to break this down. Ve'avia yarak befanea halo tikalem. If her father were to spit in her face, she should be ended. Kalem, done. Lechalot, ended, finished. Then shiv'at yamim tisager. 7 days she will be quarantined. Shiv'at yamim michutz lamachane. So twice it says 7 days and 7 days. 7 days outside the camp. You see? Okay. But because Moses insisted that she be healed and forgiven, in other words, do not hold anything against her on my account. God's like, fine. But for my account, a little bit, because still. So not only did God not destroy her, but God forwent his own shame, because Moses forwent his. Forwent. You get the idea, right? Thereby giving Miriam the minimum amount of time, 7 days, for the sake of ritual and spiritual purity. In other words, just do the minimum, get clean, and rejoin, right? From here, the sages say, 7 instances. 1, a male afflicted with unclean issue needs 7 days for his purification. 2, a woman with an issue requires 7 days separation. 3, a menstruant needs 7 days of purification. 4, one made unclean through a corpse needs 7 days of purification. 5, a mourner mourns for 7 days. 6, the wedding feasts last for 7 days. 7, a leper requires 7 days of separation. So Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is giving us examples here of 7 days of separation and purification, be it in positive or in the negative sense. From where do we know that a male with a discharge requires 7 days for his purification? Because it is said in Leviticus 15:13, when the man with the discharge is clean of his discharge, he shall count 7 days for himself for his purification, and then immerse his garments and immerse his flesh in spring water, and he shall be clean. From where do we know that a woman with a discharge requires 7 days of purification? Because it is said in Leviticus 15:28. And if she becomes clean of her discharge, she shall count for herself 7 days, and after this she may be cleansed. These are still relevant. Well, the second one is still relevant for today. For where do we know that a menstruant requires 7 days of separation? Because it is said in Leviticus 15:19, if a woman has a discharge, her flesh discharging blood, she shall remain in her state of menstrual separation for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall become unclean until evening. It does not say her state, but rather in her state. The laws of purity are vital for any kind of rectification. If you are not clean physically, ritually, and of course spiritually, right? You have to work yourself up from body to spirit. No matter what you do when it comes to serving God, all your good works and all your good intentions go to the Sitra Achra, to the dark side, if you do not do things properly. The reason is very simple. You are a conduit, right? This is why God said that no priest who has a blemish or is lame or is anything but perfect can serve in the holies. You cannot give a kolban, an offering, a perfect offering if you yourself are not perfect. This is why we said, who was Melchizedek? Melchizedek was Shem, the son of Noah, who was the priest to the Most High God. Why was it not Noah? Noah was the man, right? He was the savior of mankind and of the animals, and he was the redeemer of the earth. But when they were in the ark, the lion smote him, and Noah became lame. Therefore, Noah could no longer give korbanot. He could not give an offering to God. So when it says that Noah gave an offering after they left the ark, it wasn't him who was doing it. He taught Shem how to do it. And then Shem became the exclusive offer, the Kohen, the priest, to El Elyon. So it wasn't Noah because he was lame, it was Shem. Then later on, like we said, that title of Melchizedek was transferred to Abraham. Okay. These are the laws of kashrut, some of the things we just read. What you put into your body, for every Jew, it matters. The laws of ritual purity, when it comes to matters of husband and wife, for the sake of drawing souls from high and pure places. This is why it's still relevant to today. Whether there is a temple or not, you could still go into a mikveh, and you have to go into the mikveh. So when the husband and wife are holy, they draw from the wellspring of the holy souls, right? As opposed to Jewish couples who do not abide by these laws. And unfortunately, we'll go with at least 50% do not abide by these laws. So it's not only the separation and the second is 7 days of separation, but also when there is a time for the separation. So it's not only that you do not engage in unity, you do not touch each other. No high fives, no nothing. You cannot physically touch each other, even by accident, because then that impurity, like we said, it transfers to the husband, even though he did not do anything. You see? And then it just keeps bouncing back and forth from person to person. It's not a good thing. So this is why these laws are very, very strict. And those who do not abide by them, they usually draw souls from impure places. And that is where you get wayward children as a result. Impurity from the most impurity from the most impurity. See some of those teachings in the Red series about Yeshua and where he came from. And there are many other laws which we gladly live by, since they are what separates us from the nations. Again, it's not like the nations need to do this. The nations do not need to do this. So if they don't abide by these laws, they're not doing anything wrong. This is exclusively for Israel. The entire book of Leviticus tells every person from which station they belong to how to come correct before God, whether you are in Israel, a Levite, or a Kohen. Let's continue. Rabbi Zera said, the daughters of Israel have made the law exceptionally stringent for themselves, machmirot, so that if they see a blood stain the size of a mustard seed, they observe on its account 7 days. Is it a fluke? I don't know. Let's see what's going on over there. In other words, once everything is done. After that, they are cleansed of their issue of blood. The daughters of Israel are righteous and pious women, ideally, by whose merit we were redeemed from Egypt, and by whose merit we will be redeemed today. Remember, the women in the wilderness, they did not sin, not with the golden calf, not with anything. All the corrections that God gave Israel, that was only to the men, ages 20 and up. The women, they stayed out of it. That's why we say, B'zchut nashim tzadkaniot nig'anu, by the merit of pious women and righteous women, we have been redeemed, and by the merit of pious and righteous women, we will be redeemed. Now again, since we mentioned it, and how the 15-year-old girls, 12-year-old girls today are dressed, my goodness, if you could call it dressed, this is exactly what the Ben Ish Chai, I was reading some of this. This is the Ben Ish Chai, okay? Yeah. Rabbi Yosef Chaim, he said 150 years ago, he's a rabbi from Baghdad. They asked him for a sign before the coming of Mashiach, and he says all the signs that we give over here in all the Calling All Jews classes, but then he said, all right, fine, I'll give you some extra. He said, when the daughters of Israel walk around half naked or half covered in Israel, then you will know this is a clear sign right before the coming of Mashiach. Now again, sure, there were a few Jews in Israel, but the fact that now you're going to have Jewish daughters, the daughters of Israel, who were all pious and modest, walk around half naked in the land of Israel. This is something unheard of, said 150 years ago, right? No way, Jose. But he says this is a clear sign. When this happens, this is right before the coming of Mashiach. However, because they're walking around like this, the young men of Israel will die by the sword, meaning in battle. So when we see right now, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of soldiers are young men, what's happening over there, make no mistake, this is a direct correlation. It's all about the women, okay? Yeah, men are the fighters, but the women actually have that power. Anyway, okay, so there is a saying in the Torah, Ksheyesh safek ein safek, where there is doubt, there is no doubt. What does this mean? What if there's a doubt that you are not performing one of these halachot correctly? If there is a doubt in your mind that you may be breaking a command, then there is no doubt. You stop what you are doing, you check and double check, and you make sure. This is the only way that you can walk innocently and blamelessly before God. Because the moment you say, what's the big deal? Do you really think that God cares if, well, he said it, so yeah, I do. Now, again, I'm saying this even when I was younger. Do you really think, I've said these things, do you really think that God cares what kind of sponge you use on Shabbat? There are Shabbos sponges, the kind that don't necessarily soak up water because you're not allowed to squeeze. Why does it matter? Who cares why you think it matters or it does not matter? These things actually do matter, and you're doing damage to the world, and it will be held against you. All these small things, logically, perhaps, to the world, it should not make sense. Who cares? But to Israel, because God said so, don't even mess with that. Okay. By checking your own self when no one is around you, that's how it's done. By taking responsibility for everything that you do and do not do. That is how it's done. Just as David did when he sang one of the most difficult psalms a person can say. I dare it. Well, don't say this lightly, okay? Psalms 26:1. LeDavid shafteni Adonai ki ani betumi alachti u'ba'Adonai batachti lo em'ad. Of David, judge me, O Lord, for I have walked with sincerity and I trusted in the Lord, I shall not falter. There's another one that says, judge my innards and my heart. And you're asking God to put the magnifying glass on you, right? Maybe you don't want that necessarily that kind of attention. Do not say, yeah, God, judge me, I'm perfect. Because if you ask for that, he said this for a reason. In other words, I want to do everything right. He didn't question God. He didn't question what God said. He didn't question the halachot. He questioned himself. How can I do it better? That's what we're talking about. We make the correction and then we invite God to do the inspection. And if I am wrong, please correct me. Show me where I err because I want to do better. And how does he end it? How does he end the Psalms? But I walk with sincerity. Redeem me and be gracious to me. Vani betumi elech. Innocently I walk. My foot stood on a straight path. I will bless the Lord in the assemblies. Not exactly the best translation. Ragli amda b'mishol. B'mekelim avarech Adonai. B'mishol, so it's not necessarily a straight path, but rather a plateau, meaning it is flat, solid, and stable ground to stand on. You know what's there. You know what's beneath you. Nothing is shaky, right? Okay, this is good. One step at a time. And all this done by removing any doubts. It's the only way. And these are the daughters of Israel, like Rabbi Zeira said, the daughters of Israel in their core of Israel made the law exceptionally stringent for themselves. Because again, it's not only about them, they could also trip up their husbands. The responsibility. From where do we know that one made unclean through coming into contact with a corpse needs 7 days of purification? Because it says in Numbers 19:16, anyone who touches one slain by the sword, or a corpse, or a human bone, or a grave, in an open field, he shall be unclean for 7 days. Now, again, this is tum'at met. Why is this not relevant for today? Because we do not have the Efer Paraduma, the ash of the red heifer. That removes the uncleanliness of death. But today, the entire world is under Tum'at Met. So what does it mean? How do we cleanse ourselves from that? We're waiting for the 10th and final red heifer, right? And then once that cleans everybody, then we can start giving the offerings in the temple and so on. Okay, from where do we know that a mourner mourns for 7 days? Because it says in Genesis 50:10, and they came to the threshing floor on the thorn bushes, which is on the other side of the Jordan, and there they conducted a very great and impressive eulogy, and he made for his father a mourning of 7 days. This was when they were burying Jacob. So this is Joseph and his brothers burying Jacob. From where do we know that the bridal banquet lasts 7 days? Sheva brachot, 7 blessings, right? Because it says in Genesis 29, 27, 28, complete the wedding week of this one, Lavan said to Jacob, right? And the wedding week, 7 days, and we will give this one too. Now we're also going to give you Rachel, for the work that you will render me for another 7 years. And Jacob did so, and he completed the week of this one, of Leah, and he gave him his daughter Rachel, the other one, to him as a wife. And of course, to the topic that brought this all about, from where do we know that a leper keeps 7 days of purification? And again, leprosy is a spiritual infliction. We do not have that today, but I could all but guarantee you, if we can actually see leprosy today, God took it away from us because there's no way to get pure from it. There's no high priest, there's no temple. But if we could actually see the leprosy signs, there is not a single person today who would not be a leper. Maybe a couple, right? Impossible. The house, the clothes, all of it, we'd all be white as snow. All right. That's why we need the temple and we need the high priest, because God took away the remedy. He does not give the affliction. He only gives the affliction if the remedy is there beforehand, right? Okay. So from where do we know that a leper keeps 7 days of purification? From Miriam, as it is said in Numbers 12:15. So Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days. The people did not travel until Miriam had been readmitted to the camp. And that's our class for today. Stay tuned for the next class. It'll probably be before Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur comes in on Wednesday night, so probably Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. We'll try and get this class up. And that will be the final class of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. 3.5 years. Wow. In any case, thank you as always for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Have a Shabbat Shalom. This is Shabbat Shuvah. This is an important one. This is also the first Shabbos of the year. And have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye.